Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 2nd of May of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And as usually, the most important and interesting updates are coming from Bakhmut these days. As you can see, the Russian sources deployment map has been updated. Currently, we can find progress in the northwest of part of Bakhmut, and the Russian sources are saying, and the Ukrainian source confirms, that this is the area of the most heaviest and fierce clashes in this town. And as you can see, according to this map, that the most of Ukrainian brigades are moved in this area, in this direction, to stay as close as possible to the evacuation roads. For example, today there was a piece of information, according to the Wagners, that during the day, some very high officers, so Ukrainian officers, visited the western part of Bakhmut, and during that process, one of the armored vehicle was destroyed by the Russian artillery, and the Wagners reported that they managed to kill the general of the territory defense brigade in this area. Later, the Ukrainian officials reported that nobody was killed during that attack, so this is like the thing that happens in Bakhmut. If we take a look at the Western sources map, and according to the report, we understand that currently the Russians are trying to develop their offensive operation in direction of the hospital along Piramogi Street. Currently, there are very heavy clashes and fierce clashes in the vicinity of the Olympic School in this area. This is the last Ukrainian checkpoint fortress in this area in the northwest of Bakhmut. And if the Russians are able to take this area under control, then it will just take maybe even hours until the Russians reach the river and the Khromova from the south. Also, the Russians are trying to develop their offensive operation between the western fortification and Piramogi Street as well. Very small local attacks. But as you can see, according to the maps, every single map, the Russians are not entering this western fortification. And this is not about the fact that there are a lot of Ukrainians, but there are a lot of Ukrainians, of course. And the main reason is that almost every single building, possibly that almost every single building in this area is mined by the Ukrainians. And the Russians understand that it's just a useless waste of time to attack this area. For them, it's much more easier to attack this area from the north and to cut the final supply road, the final supply endpoint that located in this area. And if the Russians are able to block or take control, then we see that even if there are some forces, they will be completely encircled and blocked in this western part of Bakhmut, and it will take just days or maybe weeks until the area falls and the Ukrainians are going to surrender. But anyway, if the Russians are able to do this, we can say that entire Bakhmut is taken by the Russians. And of course, as we understand, the Russians will try to achieve this goal by the 9th of May, and from the other side, the Ukrainians will do the same. They will try to keep and hold this area as long as possible, and from the things that we see, that Ukrainians are almost encircled and that they don't have, or their possibilities to evacuate from this area is too low, I believe that they will stay here until the 9th of May, because simply say that basically they don't have possibilities to evacuate. As you can see, some Russian sources are saying that the Russians managed to cross Tchaikovsky Street from the south, moving in this direction, so we can say that possibly this part of the hat of cauldron has already been created, and there's not much left until the entire cauldron of the rest of Bakhmut. The Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost, when talking about the entire Donetsk front line, not just about Bakhmut, the Ukrainians lost 300 soldiers, 11 armored vehicles, including one tank and one artillery system D-20. Other important updates are coming from Avdiivka, from this front line. At least several Ukrainian sources this evening of the local time start publishing information updates that Ukrainians launched their own counter-offensive operation in this area, and as a result of those offensive operations, they managed to penetrate the Russians' defense orders in the vicinity of Avdiivka for up to 1.5 kilometers. Later, also this day, the Russian sources, who has connections with the forces on the ground, collected all the possible information and reported that that was some kind of fake from the Ukrainian side. For now, I believe it's very difficult to understand or determine who's lying and who's telling truth. I believe we need to wait for another day. And if the Ukrainians did have some progress today, I believe that in a day or in 2 weeks we would see the real progress on the map, and everybody will confirm this information. When talking about this area, the Russians reported that as a result of artillery clashes, bombings, and duels, they at one for another time in a row they attacked the positions of 24th Mechanized Brigade, but this brigade is located in Konstantinovka. This is the not very lucky brigade, 24th. If you remember, a few days ago, the Russians reported as a result of missile attack of the headquarters of that brigade, 24th Brigade in Konstantinovka, up to 200 soldiers were killed and up to 280 soldiers were wounded, so up to 1 battalion. So today the Russians continue attacking this area. Furthermore, the Russians reported that as a result of attack they managed to destroy some railroads, some trains on the railroadways in Konstantinovka with the ammo on board. The Russians haven't provided the info about the real number of losses and so on, tons of ammo, but anyway, when talking about the defense operation of Bakhmut, every single warehouse is very important these days. Very interesting updates are coming from Kherson area, from this region. As you can see, there are a lot of icons, and we see that there is some kind of intensifying of activities from the Ukrainian side, and more facts and numbers are saying that this is exactly the area where the Ukrainians are going to launch their counter-offensive operation. At least I'm not sure about the bank of the river between Golaya Pristin, let's say, and Novokakhovka. I'm not sure about any possible operation from the Ukrainian side in this area. But when talking about Kinburn Strait, about this part of Kherson region, I give you like 90% that Ukrainians are going to cross this Dnipro River and this bay and to establish control over this Kinburn Strait. If we take a look at one more time, if we take a look at the Russian sources map, today the Russians reported that as a result of artillery duels and some kind of clashes, they managed to shut down 2 aircrafts, one more time, one MiG-29 on the north. I believe that there are no connections of this MiG-29 with the situation on the south, and furthermore they confirmed another destroyed Su-25 in the vicinity of Vilitenska. If we will increase the range of updates that we can see on this area, let's say for months, we're gonna see that there are very heavy clashes on the islands exactly in this area, and we see that Ukrainians are trying to capture every single small local port in this area, the ex-residential area. There are a lot of them. Using the boats, they can establish control, they can establish some radars and so on, and they're pushing and trying to develop their bridgehead to the south in direction of this Kinburn Strait. From the other side, furthermore, as you can see, the Ukrainians also uses a lot of air forces in this area, so we see that this area is very important for the Ukrainians. From the Russian side, the Russians are bombing this bank of Dnipro River. They're destroyed using the guided bombs. Also, the Russians attacking using the guided bombs the Ukrainian positions on these islands, and there is a very fierce clashings, and the facts are saying that possibly the Ukrainians will try to do this, because no matter the results of the counter-offensive Ukrainian operation, we understand that, for example, some official Ukrainian authorities also reported and confirmed my words that possibly there are going to be not just one counter-offensive operation from the Ukrainian side, possibly they're going to be the second and the third, and depending on this upcoming counter-offensive operation, the Western countries would determine which kind of support they will provide to the Ukrainians. So that's why they need to show the results, and possibly if the Ukrainians are going to be successful during the upcoming counter-offensive operation, they will get Abrams and the F-16 Air Force airplanes this year. So no matter the results, no matter the loss from the Ukrainian side, they need to take control. The Ukrainians need to take control over this Kinburn Strait, because as we discussed in the past, it will allow them to unblock Nikolaev port. And of course, one port is good, but to have 2 ports is the best thing. Furthermore, we know that the Russians have already blocked the grain deal. I don't have any updates, more fresh news, piece of news about the situation, but I believe that the battle for the Black Sea with the naval forces of Russian Federation will be a part of this counter-offensive operation, of course, and the Ukrainians will try to destroy the Russian fleet, and with one purpose, to unblock the grain deal, or at least to make this situation like very uncomfortable for the Russians, and not to allow the Russians to block this area anymore. And if they have, after all, 2 ports, of course, they will have more weapon, more supply from the Western countries, and it can increase the Ukrainian pressure on towards the Russian position. So no matter the results and no matter the situation, how the things is going to develop in Zaporizhia area, the Ukrainians will try to cross the river, this bay, and they will try to establish control over this Kinburn Strait. As you can see, this is a very perfect position for the Ukrainians, because from on the bank in the Chaka of all this area, they will have a lot of artillery positions that would be completely untouchable from the Russian side, at least the positions in the Chakova. And if the Russians want to destroy the Ukrainian artillery position in Chaka, there are not much way they can do this. First of all, using drones, of course, or maybe missiles, but the Russians, for example, won't be able to attack the Ukrainian positions in Achakov using their own artillery, because the position is not very good for the Russian side. Anyway, the Ukrainians will try, at least during the first phase, to establish control over the strait just with light infantry. They don't have possibilities to move their tanks or something like this, but it will be like the second, the third stage of the counter-offensive operation. They will try to get some kind of vehicles, some kind of construction vehicles, and to prepare as much as possible trenches in this area. The Ukrainians do have a lot of boats, a lot of way how to supply this area, and no matter the losses during the next stage of this special military operation this year, they will try to hold this area as long as possible. If you ask me, I'll give you my own opinion. For example, the question is why the Ukrainians won't try to attack the Russians along this Dnieper River, and the answer is very simple: is because this bank of the river is a small but very long town. There are a lot of buildings, a lot of residential area. There is a lot of places where the Russians can hide. Furthermore, there is a mainland right behind this area where the Russians can establish their artillery system, and using this artillery system, they can suppress the Ukrainian positions, and without any danger or any risk being hit by the Ukrainian side. Furthermore, the Russians uses a lot of missiles, rockets. They uses artillery system, air forces, and so on. But when talking about the Kinburn Strait, we see that, for example, if the Russians want to get their artillery, they can deploy their artillery somewhere in 15-20 kilometers. So as you can see, if the Russians will get their artillery to this line, it's like 40 kilometers to these positions. So it's not very good. It will be very difficult for the Russians to protect this area. The only possible way what the Russians are able to do is to use fleet to defend this area, but it's so risky to use Russian fleet and to send Russian fleet toward this Kinburn Strait. It's too risky, and the Russians can really lost every single ship in their fleet if they take a decision to protect this area using fleet. I'm not sure what the Russians are going to do, but I think that it's too risky. And if you ask me, I'm not saying that I'm for the Ukrainians or for the Russians. I'm just saying you that there is a very high chances, as I understand, that the Ukrainians are able to establish control over this part of the Kinburn Strait, and they will keep and hold this area as long as possible, because for them it's a vital question. And when talking about the Russians, currently they maybe during some period of time, as a result of their own counter-offensive operation against the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation, they will be able to return control over this strait, but it will take time, and possibly maybe without establishing control over Achakov and Nikolaev, there would be very low chances if the Russians are able to return control back over this Kinburn Strait. It's the most dangerous part, and the Ukrainians understand this, and of course they will increase their pressure, and we will see this operation also very soon. Furthermore, Blinken reported today, for example, that the next week the Ukrainians are going to launch their counter-offensive operation the next week, so it was like some kind of like a promise. And we understand that the 9th of May is the next week. It's Tuesday of the next week, so I believe that possibly on the 9th of May the Ukrainians are going to launch some provocation, some action, and right exactly at this date or the day before they will launch their counter-offensive operation, and this is going to be something terrible with many losses and possibly with many losses from both sides. Furthermore, the Russian sources are saying that Ukrainians have already completed the creation of the first wave of the counter-offensive operation. You know that the Ukrainians have a lot of types of weapon, their own forces, the forces that were trained in the Western countries, and many other things. So, as I understand, as the first wave of counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians are going to use their own forces, and there is going to be a 128th Storm Brigade, 46th, 71st Brigade. These brigades are already deployed in this area. For example, the 71st Brigade is deployed in the vicinity of Nikopol, and possibly the Ukrainians will make another attempt to cross Dnipro River and to establish control over the Zaporizhia power plant, and it's like a very tasty piece of cake, and I believe that the Ukrainians will try to do this. For example, when talking about Orekhov Gulay Polya, the Ukrainians have already redeployed their 46th Mechanized Brigade, 128th, 116th. There were updates, so I believe that this brigade will be used as the first wave, as the brigades that main purpose is to penetrate and to ruin the first line of Russian defense. And after that, only after that, maybe the Ukrainians will use their newly created brigade, Western countries brigade, that will just pass by the destroyed and fields of dead bodies of the Ukrainians and the Russians in the direction of Tokmak. Furthermore, the Russian sources are saying that during the previous 24 hours there was another terrorist attack in Melitopol. The Ukrainians mined the area and they wanted to kill some kind of police officer who supported the Russian forces. The Russians are saying that this person was wounded but not killed. Now let's talk a little bit about South Donetsk area. As you can see, there are also icons, but there are not much changes on the ground. There are not changes at all on the ground. The Russians are saying that as a result of clashes on South Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson area, the Ukrainians lost 80 soldiers, 9 armored vehicles and 1 artillery system. As you can see, not much losses. And the same situation we can say there is the same situation as there was yesterday, before yesterday on the Kupiansk and Liman front line. The Russians are saying that as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost 125 soldiers, 9 armored vehicles and 3 artillery systems. The Russians attacked using the artillery and missiles the same brigades, 14th, 92nd Mechanized Brigade on the Kupiansk front line. Also, the Ukrainians lost another ammo depot of 14th Mechanized Brigade. And when talking about Liman, the same brigades, 81st, 58th in the vicinity of Serebryanka Forest were attacked by the Russians. Also, 1 ammo depot of 81st Air Assault Brigade was destroyed in Grigorievka, but as you can see also there are no changes on the ground. Today the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation gave another report about the situation on the front lines during the past months, during the April, and he reported that as a result of clashes, as a result of special military operation, the Ukrainians lost more than 15,000 soldiers just for the April, so the losses are very heavy. It's around 3 fully blooded brigades. The numbers are very bad for the Ukrainians, and furthermore the Russians are saying that they managed to increase the production of modern weapon in 2.5 times. Now according to the Russian sources, they don't have problems with production of any type of weapon, neither drones or shells or something like this. I believe that currently the Russians are working on the establishing of logistic, and something tells me that somewhere by the end of May, or maybe right in the middle or during the Ukraine counter-offensive operation, the Russians will launch their own, maybe not like counter-offensive operation, but the massive attack using everything they have that could lead to significant losses from the Ukrainian side. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.